Ada and Ruth had built a peaceful empire within the grand mansion of Mr. Bami, their wealthy husband. Despite their differences, Ada's calm nature and Ruth's fiery spirit, their bond had been unbreakable. They lived in the lap of luxury, shopping designer clothes, handbags, and perfumes from the finest boutiques. Their daily routine was filled with pampering, laughter, and the delicious aroma of meals prepared together, rich jollof rice, succulent roasted chicken, and steaming bowls of fufu with vegetable soup. Mr. Bami, despite his old age, adored his two wives. He often chuckled at their banter, shaking his head as he enjoyed the royal treatment they gave him. There was no stress, no quarrels. And even though he had no children, he was content with the life he had built, until everything changed. The sun had barely set when Mr. Bami's black Mercedes-Benz pulled into the compound. Ada and Ruth stood by the entrance, their smiles wide, excited to welcome their husband back from his trip, but the moment the car door opened, their smiles stiffened. A woman stepped out, her elegance undeniable. Juliet. Her skin was smooth like fresh milk, and her features glowed under the dim porch light. Even the way she walked had a certain grace, a delicate softness that made her seem untouchable. Ada blinked. Ruth narrowed her eyes. "Honey, welcome," they said in unison, forcing their voices to remain steady. "Who is she?" Mr. Bami let out a deep sigh before grinning. "She is my new wife. I met her in Ghana during my business trip. One thing led to another, and we fell in love. You know I don't like messing around, so I had to marry her." Ada and Ruth exchanged a glance, disbelief written all over their faces. As the driver pulled Juliet's luxury suitcases from the trunk, reality hit them hard. A third wife. A stranger in their territory. That evening, Ruth stormed into Ada's bedroom. "What are we going to do about this situation?" she demanded. Ada sat on the edge of her bed, rubbing her temples. "I don't know, Ruth. I really don't. I'm just confused. Why would he do this?" Ruth paced. "Aren't we good enough? He can't impregnate us, and he refused to adopt. So why marry again?" She clenched her fist, the anger rising. "I will deal with the new wife." Ada shook her head firmly. "No, don't do that. When he married you, I accepted you with an open heart. I didn't trouble you. Don't do that to her," Ruth scoffed. "So we just sit here and let her take over," Ada sighed. "She just arrived. Let's try and live in peace first. We'll see what happens." But Ruth wasn't convinced. And deep down, Ada knew the arrival of Juliet was only the beginning of trouble. The grand mansion, once a place of harmony and indulgence, now felt different. Juliet's arrival had disrupted the balance that Ada and Ruth had carefully maintained. The two wives had their routine, their own rhythm, shopping at exclusive boutiques, selecting the finest jewelry, preparing delicious meals together. But now, there was an intruder, and no matter how composed Ada tried to be, she felt it. The third wife's presence had shifted everything. Juliet moved gracefully through the house, as though she owned it. And worst of all, Mr. Bami was enchanted by her. He had never been a man to play favorites. But with Juliet, he beamed at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. The first few days were strange. Ada and Ruth tried to include Juliet in their activities. They invited her to shop, to help prepare the grand meals that Mr. Bami loved so much, but she seemed different. She wasn't interested in bonding with them the way they had bonded with each other. She was polite, yes. Too polite. The kind of politeness that made Ada's stomach churn. And then it happened, the first act of betrayal. One evening, as was their tradition, Ada and Ruth prepared a feast for the household. The kitchen was their sanctuary, filled with the warmth of boiling stews and the scent of freshly pounded fufu. They had never allowed anyone to interfere. This was their sacred routine. But that night, Juliet entered the kitchen. Ada wiped her hands, surprised. "Do you need something?" she asked. Juliet smiled softly. "Oh no, I just wanted to help," Ruth narrowed her eyes. "We've got everything under control," Juliet let out a sweet laugh, then waved her hand dismissively. "Come on, we are all wives here. Let's cook together." "No need to be hostile," reluctantly, Ada agreed, though she could sense Ruth's displeasure. It didn't feel right. But they allowed Juliet to stay. And she took the role of seasoning the food. Harmless enough. The meal was served, and the whole household gathered around. And that was the moment disaster struck. The first spoonful entered Mr. Bami's mouth, and he stopped chewing. His expression hardened. His brows furrowed. He reached for his cup of water, gulping it down desperately. "Who made this food?" he asked, his voice low. Ada and Ruth exchanged a nervous glance. "We did. As usual," Ada said. Mr. Bami slammed his hand on the table. "Nonsense. It tastes horrible." "Who ruined my jollof rice?" Ruth's eyes flashed dangerously. She knew Juliet had done something. Juliet looked innocent. Touching Mr. Bami's arm gently. "Oh, darling, I only helped a little. Maybe I accidentally added too much salt, really." "That's strange." Ada and Ruth had been cooking together for years. Their food had never disappointed. Never. Ruth clenched her fist, rage building in her chest. She was playing a game, and Ruth refused to lose. The house was tense for weeks. Ada and Ruth became careful, ensuring Juliet did not interfere with the kitchen again. But that didn't stop her from slowly worming her way into Mr. Bami's heart. She was the first wife he greeted in the morning. The first he sat beside. The first he smiled at, and then one afternoon, the shocking news dropped like a bomb. Juliet was pregnant. Ada froze. Ruth laughed bitterly. The entire household was confused. Mr. Bami had always been clear he could not have children. It was impossible, so how was Juliet pregnant? Ruth, unable to hide her fury, stormed up to Ada. "This woman is a fraud. And I'm going to find out exactly what she's planning." Ada took a deep breath, shaking her head. "We need to think carefully. We can't just accuse her." "What if?" Ruth cut her off, eyes burning with determination. "No, Ada. We are not sitting back this time. We need to act. Before she destroys everything." The mansion, once a place of opulence and serenity, now felt like a battleground. Ada and Ruth had always understood their roles, had accepted their place in Mr. Bami's life, but Juliet's arrival had turned their world upside down, and now, she was pregnant. A miracle that should have been impossible, but was it truly a miracle, or a lie? Ruth wasn't one to sit idly by. She had spent years mastering the art of survival in this home, understanding every unspoken rule, every shift in power. And now, she was determined to unravel Juliet's secret. Late one evening, she pulled Ada aside in the dimly lit corridor, away from prying eyes. "We need proof," Ruth whispered. "We need to find out exactly how she's doing this." Ada hesitated. "But what if it's a miracle?" "No." Ruth's voice was sharp. "I won't let this woman replace us. I won't let her win." Together, they formed a plan. They would watch Juliet closely, observe her every move. They would uncover whatever deception she was weaving, and most importantly, they would strike back before it was too late. A week passed before Mr. Bami announced that a doctor would be visiting to confirm Juliet's pregnancy. Ada and Ruth exchanged glances. This was their chance. They made sure to be present when the doctor arrived, standing in the doorway as Juliet sat gracefully in the lounge, her hands resting lightly on her stomach. The doctor, an elderly man with a kind face, examined her carefully, asking routine questions, and then, after a long pause, he cleared his throat. "I must say, Mr. Bami, this is quite unexpected." The room fell into silence. Juliet smiled. "Doctor, miracles happen every day." The doctor nodded slowly, but there was something in his eyes, something uncertain. Ruth noticed it, and she was going to find out exactly what he wasn't saying. That night, while the house slept, Ruth slipped out of her bedroom and made her way to the study where the doctor had placed his reports. She wasn't alone. Ada was right behind her. Her heart pounding. Together, they rifled through the paperwork, searching, scanning until they found it, a single note scribbled in the margins of the doctor's records. Further tests required. Something does not add up, Ada gasped. Ruth smiled. Juliet wasn't just hiding something, she was lying. And now, they had proof. The mansion was on edge, the wives moving like players in a chess game, each waiting for the right moment to strike. Juliet thought she had won, but Ada and Ruth were ready. They had seen the deception, they had uncovered the truth. And soon, Mr. Bami would see it too. The quiet tension within the mansion had become suffocating. Juliet had carefully positioned herself as the favored wife. Her belly now the symbol of power. A child that shouldn't exist. But Ada and Ruth were no fools. They had seen the cracks in her perfect facade, and now, they had evidence. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was fact. Juliet was hiding something, and they were going to expose her. Ada and Ruth weren't known for rash decisions, but this was different. This was war. The moment Mr. Bami returned home one evening, Ada stepped forward, her voice steady but laced with urgency. "We need to talk, darling," Mr. Bami frowned. "What is it?" Juliet appeared in the doorway, her presence like a silent warning. She knew. She sensed something was coming. Ruth crossed her arms. "We visited the doctor's study. And we found something." Juliet's smile wavered. Mr. Bami's eyes darkened. "Found what?" Ada took a slow breath. "He has doubts about Juliet's pregnancy. He wrote it in his report." Further tests are needed. A heavy silence fell over the room. Juliet's fingers twitched against the silk fabric of her gown. "I don't understand," she said softly, her tone almost convincing. "Why would you go through my medical records?" She wasn't denying the claim. She was stalling, but Ruth wouldn't let her slip away because something doesn't add up. "You're lying. We know it." Mr. Bami looked from one wife to another, his expression unreadable. "Juliet," he said slowly, "is this true?" And that was when Juliet played her final card. She exhaled shakily, lowering her gaze as if in shame. "I didn't want to tell you, my love, because I was afraid." "But yes," the doctor had concerns at first. Ada clenched her teeth. Ruth narrowed her eyes. Juliet continued, her voice sweet, controlled. "But he ran further tests, and everything is fine now. I was going to share the news tonight. I wanted to surprise you, and Mr. Bami, ever the trusting man, believed it. Then that's the end of it." His voice was firm. "We should be celebrating this child, not fighting over suspicions." Juliet smiled, victorious, but Ruth saw it, the flicker in her eyes. A brief moment of relief, not joy. She had been close to losing, but next time, Ada and Ruth would make sure she had no escape. Defeated but not broken, the two wives retreated to Ada's room, their minds racing. "She's good," Ada muttered, but she made a mistake. Ruth tapped her fingers against the vanity table. She didn't deny the doctor's note outright. She just twisted the story. Ada exhaled. "We need undeniable proof, Ruth. If we expose her too soon, she'll twist it again." Ruth smiled darkly. "Then we'll watch her. She won't be able to hide forever." Juliet thought she had won. She thought her deception had been neatly sewn into Mr. Bami's heart, but Ada and Ruth had fire in their veins. This wasn't over, and soon, Juliet would learn that the true queens of the mansion would not be replaced. Tensions no longer lingered in the shadows. They had erupted into a storm that could not be ignored. Juliet's grip on Mr. Bami had tightened. She had positioned herself as the new queen of the household, her pregnancy now a weapon rather than a blessing. But Ada and Ruth were not defeated. They had seen the deception, and now, they had a plan. Ruth had always been resourceful, but this time, she needed absolute certainty. She contacted someone outside the mansion, an investigator known for uncovering secrets that people worked hard to bury. His name was David, and he had a reputation for being ruthless. The meeting was arranged in secrecy at a small cafe downtown. David leaned back in his chair, scanning Ada and Ruth with practiced skepticism. "You need proof of deception?" he asked. "What exactly do you suspect?" Ruth wasted no time. "The pregnancy. The timing. Everything about Juliet is suspicious." David nodded. "I'll dig into her past. If there's anything worth finding, I'll find it." And with that, the clock started ticking, while David worked his connections. Ada took matters into her own hands. Late one night, under the dim glow of the hallway lamps, she snuck into Mr. Bami's study, a place where important documents, private notes, and decisions were locked away. She knew she was taking a risk, but she also knew the truth was buried somewhere within this room. Her fingers moved quickly, shuffling through files, scanning reports until she found it, a single letter, carefully folded inside an envelope. It was addressed to Mr. Bami, but the sender was unknown. Ada opened it, her breath catching as she read the words, "Mr. Bami, the truth you seek is dangerous. Look deeper before you lose everything." It was a warning, a threat. Ada clenched her jaw. Someone else knew. Someone else was trying to warn him. She needed to act fast. The investigator worked quickly, and within days, he called Ruth with an update. Juliet wasn't always Juliet, he told her over the phone. She changed her name 5 years ago. There's no record of her before that. Ruth's stomach dropped. "Meaning," David hesitated. "Meaning she's hiding something. And I just found out exactly what." A silence stretched between them. Then that evening Ada and Ruth met David. And then David spoke the words that changed everything. Juliet was married before. Her last husband vanished without a trace. Ada and Ruth stared at David in disbelief. "Vanished?" Ada whispered. David nodded grimly. "Nobody. No records. Just gone." Ruth felt cold fear creeping up her spine. Juliet wasn't just a liar, she was dangerous. And they had just stepped into her web. The truth was unraveling, but Juliet wasn't going down without a fight. She had managed to manipulate Mr. Bami, but now, Ada and Ruth had leverage. Juliet's past was a mystery, her pregnancy was questionable, and her connection to a man who had disappeared was a secret that could destroy everything. But one question remained: how far would Juliet go to keep her throne? Juliet's mystery ran deep. The facade of elegance and charm she maintained was beginning to crumble as Ada and Ruth pried further. David's revelation about Juliet's missing ex-husband had confirmed what they had suspected. This woman was more than just a manipulator. She was dangerous, but the true horror was yet to come. Ada had always been one to trust her instincts. And something told her that the answers to Juliet's past lay within the mansion itself. One evening, while Mr. Bami was away on business, Ada and Ruth took the opportunity to search Juliet's bedroom. They moved quickly, digging through closets, scanning shelves, until Ruth found something stuffed. Beneath the back of a drawer, a leather-bound diary. Ada opened it cautiously, flipping through brittle pages filled with secrets, and then they found it, a passage that sent shivers down their spines. He never suspected a thing. Poor fool. If only he had listened to the warnings. Ada's breath hitched. Ruth clenched her fist. The missing husband. Juliet had written about him, and from the chilling tone in the words, he hadn't just disappeared, he had been removed. Determined to force Juliet's hand, Ada and Ruth hatched a new plan. They would watch her closely, look for patterns, and soon, they found something terrifying. Juliet always served Mr. Bami's tea herself. She would brew it in the kitchen, carefully stir in the ingredients, and carry it to his study. No one else ever touched the tea. And every evening, after drinking it, Mr. Bami seemed weaker, more exhausted, more irritable, more under Juliet's spell. Ada and Ruth's suspicion turned to certainty. Juliet wasn't just manipulating Mr. Bami, she was poisoning him, and it had been happening right under their noses. The truth was horrifying, but now, Ada and Ruth had evidence. They couldn't confront her, yet not without proof that would break her completely. So they devised a trap. They would switch the cups. One evening, as Juliet prepared Mr. Bami's tea, Ada subtly swapped it with a harmless duplicate. Juliet didn't notice. She carried the cup to Mr. Bami, smiling sweetly as always, but this time, he drank nothing but harmless tea. And Juliet was the only one drinking from the poison cup. Within minutes, her smile faded, her breathing became labored. And as the dizziness overtook her, Ada and Ruth watched in cold triumph. Juliet had been caught. And now, the true battle would begin. Juliet's downfall had begun. The poison tea, her own signature method turned against her, had weakened her, but it hadn't destroyed her. She was gasping for air, gripping the edge of the chair as dizziness overtook her senses, but she was still dangerous. Ada and Ruth watched, their expressions unreadable. They had exposed her, but they knew this wasn't over. And then, just as expected, her lips parted, and she played her final card. "My love," she whispered, reaching weakly for him. "They tried to poison me." Ada's pulse spiked. Ruth clenched her jaw. This was her move. Her last desperate attempt to twist the truth. Mr. Bami's gaze snapped to Ada and Ruth, confusion clouding his face. What is she talking about? Juliet was skilled. She knew how to cry without ruining her makeup, how to tremble just enough to seem vulnerable. And now, she was framing them. "They gave me the wrong tea," she sobbed. "They switched it. I only noticed when the dizziness started," Ada shouted, furious. "You poisoned his tea every night, Juliet. We just gave you a taste of your own game." Juliet gasped in mock horror, shaking her head. "No. No, my love, I would never do such a thing." Mr. Bami hesitated. It was the moment Ada and Ruth feared. He was doubting them. They needed to think fast. Before anyone could say another word, the doorbell rang, a sharp, piercing sound that cut through the tension. The household staff had no idea who the guest was, but when the door was opened, a stranger stepped inside, tall, dark suit, eyes like cold steel. "David, the investigator." Juliet froze. Mr. Bami turned sharply. "Who is this?" David pulled out a folder and sat down. His voice calm but chilling. "I am the man your wives hired to look into Juliet. And what I found will shock you all." Juliet's breath hitched. Ada and Ruth smiled. Now, the real game was beginning. David wasted no time flipping through the pages of his report. Juliet's world was collapsing. David placed open another file, his expression dark. "You need to see this," he said, his voice grave. Ada and Ruth leaned forward, feeling a chill crawl down their spines. Mr. Bami, still stunned by Juliet's betrayal, stared blankly. David slid the file open, revealing a series of death records, all connected to Juliet, all ruled as mysterious poisonings. Ada's breath caught. Ruth clenched her fist. Juliet's history was worse than they had imagined. David exhaled sharply. "Your wife," he said, locking eyes with Mr. Bami, "has killed before. Not just her husband. More men. More people." Silence hung like a storm ready to break. David continued, his voice sharp and cold. "Every city she has lived in, at least one man has died under suspicious circumstances. Poison. Slow, methodical. Just like what was happening to you." Mr. Bami stiffened. David flipped another page, and there it was, the worst revelation yet. She had killed her own father. And her brother, because they had questioned her. And the child in her womb right now does not belong to you. It belongs to her last husband. Ada gasped. Ruth shook with fury. Juliet had murdered her own blood to maintain control, and now, she had tried to do the same to Mr. Bami. Juliet had been listening the entire time, and as the truth unfolded, she knew this was the end. But she wasn't one to surrender. Instead, she laughed. A sharp, chilling sound that sent a wave of dread through the room. "You think you've won," she hissed, her voice filled with venom. "You think you can take everything from me?" She sat down shaking, but her eyes were fierce. "I built this. I made him love me. I was going to be the mother of his heir." Mr. Bami was shocked and disgusted. Finally he overpowered the denial in his head. "You are a murderer," he whispered. Juliet's smile twisted. "Then why am I still here?" She sneered. "Because you let me in. Because you trusted me. Because in the end, you are the loser, you weak man, you can't even perform well in the room." Ada moved fast. She grabbed Juliet's wrist before she could throw anything else or attempt an escape. Juliet fought, thrashing wildly, but the household staff had already moved in. She was dragged away, screaming, refusing to accept defeat. Her reign was over, and the wives had won. Juliet sat in the courtroom, her once perfect image reduced to nothing but a shadow of what she used to be. The world had learned her secrets and the trail of poisoned men, the family members who had vanished under suspicious circumstances. There was no mercy for her now, the judge's voice rang through the tense air. "Juliet Bami, you are hereby sentenced to life in prison for multiple counts of premeditated murder." A sharp gasp echoed across the room. Some had hoped she would receive the death penalty. Some felt it was the only true justice for the monster she had become. But life in prison. She would rot in a cage, and that, perhaps, was worse. As the guards dragged Juliet away, she fought, she screamed her last cries of desperation, but no one listened. She was gone. And the nightmare was finally over. Back at the mansion, things were quieter now. The fear had been stripped away. The darkness was lifting, yet something still weighed on Mr. Bami. One evening, seated in the garden, he turned to Ada and Ruth, his true companions, the women who had saved him from his greatest mistake. "I failed you," he murmured, his voice thick with regret. "I let her into our home. I trusted her, even when the signs were there. I almost lost everything because I refused to listen." Ada reached for his hand, her touch gentle. "You were deceived, my love." "We don't blame you," Ruth nodded. "We only wanted you safe. And now, you are safe." Mr. Bami's eyes shone with gratitude. "You were always my greatest blessings. I should have cherished you more." They sat in silence, the warmth of forgiveness wrapping around them. The mansion was finally at peace. But peace was not enough to heal what had been done. Months passed, and despite Ada and Ruth's unwavering care, Mr. Bami grew weaker. The poison Juliet had been feeding him had eaten away at his health, bit by bit, until there was nothing more the doctors could do. Desperate, Ada and Ruth flew in the best medical experts and best specialists they could find, but even with all their efforts, he was fading. One afternoon, as the golden sunset bathed the mansion in warmth, Mr. Bami lay in his bed, his breathing shallow. He looked up at Ada and Ruth, his voice soft but filled with love. "Take care of each other. And take care of the life we built together." They held his hands as he spoke his final words, and then he was gone. Just like that, a presence so strong, a love so vast, had vanished from the world. The pain was unbearable. The mansion felt empty without him, but even in grief, Ada and Ruth found strength in each other. When the lawyers read Mr. Bami's will, the truth became clear: everything belonged to them. The mansion, the businesses, the wealth. He had left it all to the wives who had truly loved him. Juliet had stolen many years from Mr. Bami, but Ada and Ruth had given him joy. And now, they would carry on his legacy, not in sorrow, but in honor. Time passed, and the grief softened. The mansion, once a place of betrayal and suffering, became a beacon of love and hope. Ada and Ruth transformed it not into a shrine of sadness, but a home where kindness flourished. They used their wealth to help others, to uplift lives, to ensure no one else fell into the traps that had almost destroyed them, and in quiet moments. When they sat in the garden, watching the sunset, they felt Mr. Bami's presence with them. He was gone, but his love, it remained forever. This story has been one of betrayal, survival, and redemption, but at its heart, it has always been about love, the kind that survives, that endures beyond tragedy. Ada and Ruth proved that strength is found not just in victory, but in forgiveness. Mr. Bami was deceived, but in the end, he found the truth. And he left this world in the arms of the women who had truly loved him. No more fear, no more lies, just peace. Forever, moral lessons from the story. Trust but verify. Blind faith in someone's charm can lead to disaster. Always seek truth before giving someone full control over your life. Deception has consequences. Lies may seem powerful for a time, but eventually, they unravel, leaving destruction in their wake. True love is built on honesty. Ada and Ruth proved that real love is not about manipulation but about loyalty, care, and honesty. Evil thrives in silence. Those who suspect wrongdoing must act before it's too late. Staying silent in the face of deception only allows it to grow. Karma is inevitable. Juliet tried to manipulate her way to power, but in the end, justice found her. No crime goes unpunished forever. Family should never be taken for granted. Mr. Bami realized too late that the ones who truly loved him were right beside him all along. Treasure those who stand by you. Wealth means nothing without peace. A life of luxury is worthless if surrounded by betrayal. Ada and Ruth found true strength not in riches, but in love. Food for thought: how many times do we ignore red flags because we want to believe something is real? Who in your life truly has your best interest at heart? If faced with betrayal, would you seek revenge or justice? Do we always recognize the people who genuinely care for us, or do we only see it when it's too late? Is true forgiveness possible when trust is completely broken? If deception becomes a habit, does it eventually consume the deceiver? Thanks for watching. Kindly share this story with your friends and loved ones. Please leave your thoughts in the comment section and anticipate new stories from us soon. Bye for now. This was brought to you by Delia Storytime.